We're somehow 5 weeks into college football, and it's been a wild ride so far. There's been plenty of entertaining games, and in our upset alert for week 5, there are plenty of more potential upset bids at stake. Last week wasn't a great week for us, 0 points on the week after a monster week in week 3. So we're looking to bounce back in week 5. We'll start with NC State versus Louisville. I think the fact that they're playing at home gives them that advantage. I think that you're looking at Cardi Finley Stadium as one of the more underrated stadiums in college football, especially on a Friday night. I feel like it's going to get really loud there. NC State's a solid team that can play really well in front of their home fans. And Louisville is good, but they haven't been overly impressive at times. So I think that's definitely something to keep an eye on with this game. Arkansas versus Texas A&M. With the news of Connor Weigman out for the rest of the season, Texas A&M moves on to Max Johnson. Now, I have less faith in Max Johnson than I do Connor Weigman. And I think the fact that this game typically goes kind of weird ways gives us a chance for an upset. So I give Arkansas a little bit of an edge. Also, the fact that Texas A&M's defense isn't what we expected it to be could give Arkansas a little bit of an edge. USF once again is an underdog against Navy. I think that the Bulls have a lot of exciting potential in this game, and the midshipmen obviously will give them plenty of opportunities to showcase their discipline, which right now there are some questions about that. But it feels like this offense took a step forward last week, and they can keep going with that again in week 5. Houston, I don't normally like to bet Houston right now because I'm very disappointed with how they've been playing, but it feels like they're due for a surprise game. And Texas Tech isn't exactly surprising us either. They have definitely been disappointing. So this is a battle of two disappointing teams. And the fact that Houston's getting 8.5 points was almost too good to turn down. And finally, South Carolina at 12.5 point underdog against Tennessee. The fact that they beat Tennessee gives Tennessee a little bit more motivation to try and win this game. And I think that there are definitely some vulnerabilities that South Carolina could take advantage of. And there's obviously the debate about is Spencer Rattler having an elite season, or is he just dinking and dumping everywhere? So we'll see how he plays. We'll see how this game turns out. But I really like South Carolina being doubted by 12.5 points. So give me South Carolina and the points there. All right, we'll move on to bets, and it's going to be some similar picks here. We start with Houston versus Texas Tech. Once again, I think that Houston's offense has the potential to be explosive. I think that they're still trying to figure some things out, and there's definitely the potential for them to put up some points. The problem is that Texas Tech can also do the same thing. Neither one of them have been consistent. Houston is 2-2, Texas Tech is 1-3, so there's definitely opportunities for growth on both sides. But I believe that Houston has the firepower to be able to put up some points. And if they can get their defense to even play average, then they're in good hands. We'll also go USC minus 21.5 versus Colorado. It feels like this USC offense is going to do whatever they want. It's just a matter of how much their defense can show up. And we saw the blueprint last week. We saw Oregon essentially just sitting back and letting Colorado throw short passes and try to move the ball down the field efficiently. And I think that USC, even with their struggles, will try to do the same. I think that 21.5 feels way too close, but we will see how Colorado bounces back. They're definitely a team that can put up some points, and it's just a matter of how well USC's defense can actually play. Syracuse and Clemson, I think that Syracuse, while they have been a surprise so far, I think they're in for a rude awakening against Clemson. And I think that Clemson's defense will give them plenty of fits. There's definitely some issues with the Clemson or the Syracuse offense. And I think Clemson's front seven will provide plenty of challenges. So I'm taking the Syracuse team total under 23.5. I just don't think that Syracuse can score more than 3 times if they score 3 times at all. Texas is a 16.5 point favorite against Kansas. It just feels like there's a different type of athlete on the Texas Longhorns than there is on the Kansas Jayhawks. Now, I don't think this is necessarily going to be a blowout, but I think Texas does win comfortably. Michigan State and Iowa. Michigan State is a 12.5 point underdog. Now, this game will really tell us how much Michigan State cares about this season. Is this a team that's going to quit? Is this a team that will fight back and actually show some life? And Iowa right now, anybody that's getting almost 13 points against Iowa, it seems like stealing because honestly, there's no guarantee that Iowa will score 13 points. So I think that that's too big of a margin for Michigan State. And for that fact alone, will give them on the board with a 12.5 point underdog there. Oregon State and Utah play tonight, and it feels like the Beavers are ready to end Utah's magical run. We will see if Cam Rising is playing, maybe that changes things. But Oregon State still is a good team that can compete. I think that their weakness last week was the secondary, and it got exposed a little bit against Washington State. I don't really have to worry about that against Utah. Utah's not exactly lining up in any sort of air raid attack, so they should be fine there. It's just a matter of stopping the run. And then finally, we go to Pick'em. We're at 39-11 after an 8-2 week. It's been pretty fun to do this, just to pick some games, not necessarily diving too deep into the spreads and whatnot. We have USC over Colorado. That shouldn't be a surprise from the bets. Florida over Kentucky. Kentucky is undefeated, but it feels like that is not really a justified undefeated season. Florida obviously pulled up the upset over Tennessee, so I think that they can do it again against Kentucky. Clemson over Syracuse. We already talked about that. The offense appears to be firing a little bit better than they were at the beginning of the year for the Clemson Tigers, and the defense, like I said, should give Syracuse plenty of trouble. James Madison in South Alabama is a super underrated game this weekend. South Alabama is definitely capable of pulling off this upset after they just beat Oklahoma State. James Madison is playing some really good football. They are undefeated, and they, I think, will continue to be undefeated after this week. Another undefeated team in the Sun Belt is the Marshall Thundering Herd. They played Old Dominion this week, and I think this is an underrated sleeper game in terms of potential upset. Old Dominion is not on the same level as Marshall, but Marshall has to prove that. I think the passing attack for Marshall leaves something to be desired. Rasheen Ali can do so many good things, but you can only do so much. Another group of five matchup to watch: Memphis and Boise State. Now, Memphis is the team that appears to be playing better right now. Boise State has a couple things to figure out. Can their defense create more stops? Can Taylor Green become a better passer? I think those questions alone is the reason why I give Memphis the slight edge, but this game should be pretty entertaining. LSU and Ole Miss face off, and Ole Miss had a rough week against Alabama last week, and I think LSU is playing with a lot more confidence, and they have a much better offense that I think gives Ole Miss plenty of trouble. I think that there's a potential upset alert here, but it's not a good one. I think LSU is just so much better than Ole Miss right now, and I think that they take care of business. Another big game: Notre Dame and Duke face off. Notre Dame's coming off that tough loss to Ohio State. Duke obviously has that big win in week one against Clemson, but I think that Notre Dame is able to turn things around and kind of move on from last week. There is the potential for that hangover game that everybody talks about, but I think Notre Dame definitely takes care of business there. TCU and West Virginia, two conflicting styles. You have a TCU offense that wants to get going at blistering pace. You have a West Virginia defense that's underrated and likes to slow things down. If West Virginia can keep it at that pace, they're in good hands. But I think that TCU is just too good. Chandler Morris and that offense will get it done. And then finally, Washington and Arizona has the potential to, you could see both teams put up 50 points. You could also see Washington run away with it. I don't know if there's that much of an upset potential, but it's college football and we live for the upsets. We live for that thing that does not go right. So you never know what's going to happen. But I'm picking Washington over Arizona right now. Washington is just steamrolling everybody. Nobody is getting in their way. And Arizona, I think, has too many flaws to be able to compete with a team like Washington.